Hey Jack, welcome. Debbie T, welcome.
Closer to better.
Come on. You can sit in the round table too, you don't have to sit so far away. Ladies and gentlemen, members of Cathay Post and all our friends, I want to welcome everybody to meet and listen to our very, very special guest speaker today. As most of you know, I usually come here in t-shirts and shorts. But because of the special, very special occasion, I wore a tie today because we want to honor our guest speaker, who's a very unusual person. I didn't learn about him until a few years ago, and then I was stunned that we have a fellow citizen, San Franciscan here, who's had such a remarkable career and such an exemplar life. And so I wanted to make sure that he had a chance to talk to him. His name is Eddie Fung. And the thing you need to know about it is that he's a San Franciscan. And many of us were San Franciscans, but Eddie took a little different branch in his life. After he became a teenager, I think he's about 16 years old, he decided he wanted to be a cowboy. Anybody else here want to be a cowboy at 16? But few people wanted to, but you hung around and you jump on a train, go down to Midland, Texas, and go on a ranch and live like a cowboy 24 hours a day. I recommend that we've got some books that's written by Judy here that you can pick up a little later on. I highly recommend it because it's not like any book you've ever written. This is that's the book that's written with genuine love, and even as well written as was by our very distinguished scholar from UC Santa Cruz. Eddie did heavy editing to make sure that this book was really factually about him. Now the main thing about Eddie is that not only he became a cowboy, and the life of a cowboy is something I want to mention. You will find that when you read the story about how cowboys really live, you would be very, very proud of cowboys because cowboys took care of each other, just like we do in the military. And if you live in a county where a dozen ranches, if Ranch A, Jones Farm, has problems, all the other cowboys will stop everything they're doing to help out Ranch A. Now this is kind of community attitude that's really very positive, something that we don't see in real life. So make sure you get the book and read the true story about being a cowboy. Now after being for a cowboy for a little while, what happened was somebody invaded China. The Japanese invaded China and did some horrible things. And so being the very patriotic citizen that Eddie is, he quickly signed up with was it Texas Rangers? Or Texas National Guard. The Texas National Guard. He and all his buddies wanted to help in World War II, and so they all joined in. They trained, and the next thing you know, they shipped them out to Java. The thing that they didn't realize is at the time when Eddie and his unit got into the conflict, the Japanese military was extremely strong. We apparently had underestimated them. So his whole unit, along with other Allied units, including the Aussies and the French and the Brits, were surrounded, and the whole group of them, thousands of our Allied troops, including our own, had to surrender. As a result of that, Eddie and thousands of Allies, as well as American GIs, were incarcerated and made slaves for 3.5 years, where they built the very famous Siam-Burma Railway. Part of it included the bridge of the River Kwai. And a lot of us have seen the movie. Maybe we didn't see the movie recently, but some of us saw that movie 50 years ago and vaguely remember. So part of that effort, this is one of the starring players. And so I want to depart here. I don't want to say any more. I'll leave the story Eddie has, and this is a first-hand story, and I want you to know about it because it's a very, very special story. There is no other story like this in the whole country. And he's one of our own San Franciscans, and now lives in Santa Cruz. Eddie?
I noticed at the meeting today, you guys nominated Roger as a historian. And you won't regret it because whether he knows it or not, 8th of December at noontime was when we capitulated to the Japanese 72 years ago.
8th of March.
8th of March, right?
Today,
Today.
they were captured.
And and it wasn't the, excuse me, you can hear me?
Yes.
And it wasn't the U.S. Army that surrendered. We were under Dutch command. And the Dutch capitulated to the Japanese. So that was how we started out 42 months as prisoner of the Japanese. And the railroad that he mentioned employed 61,000 prisoners of war, of which 12,500 died building the railroad in 15 months. They were allowed 1 year, and when it didn't look like they were going to finish in a year, the commander of the railroad corps asked for an extension of six months, of which he used 3 months. So it took him a total of 15 months to build approximately 240 miles of railroad through jungles that even the natives didn't live in. And the purpose of the railroad was to connect Siam to Burma, which was the next jumping off place to invade India. So there was a time constraint that the Japanese military had in getting the railroad done as quickly as possible. The Americans that went up on the railroad came up as 2 groups. Group 3, Group 5. Group 3 was the advance party that went up in October of 42. Group 5 went up in January of 43. Now, all you guys in the military know that luck plays a great part in your military life. Where you are, what you were doing, who you were with, whether you got hurt or whether you didn't get hurt. Maybe all the other guys died, but you stayed alive. And that to me is just pure luck, nothing else. Of the 2 groups that went up, about 650 of us. 200 in one group, 450 in the other group. The 2 groups lost 133 people in building the railroad. But Group 3, which went up in October, lost 13 people. You don't have to be a mathematician to know that's less than 10%. So Group 5 lost 120 people. Now, we've never figured out why, except that we had a doctor and they had the battalion doctor. Our doctor was a Dutch doctor who knew of herbal medicine as well as Western medicine. But that's where luck came in. And the fact that I was Chinese, I was scared to death when we surrendered, because I've been brought up knowing the war in China since 1931. And the Japanese were my natural enemy. So, as a prisoner, you have to learn how to survive. And one of the ways of survival is to know what to be afraid of. You can't be afraid of everything because you've got to live. So one of the things I had to learn was the fact that being Chinese didn't make any difference as far as Japanese were concerned. Being white was a detriment because the Japanese hated the Western civilization. because they were looked down on. So, in many ways, okay, I'll give you another simple example. I have ingrown toenails. And I lost a pair of nail clippers that I had during my first bombing raid. And in the back of my mind, I was saying, how in the world am I going to live with ingrown toenails without a special pair of clippers? As it turned out, within a year, we were all going barefooted because we were not resupplied with shoes. And of course, any of you people who know the tropics know that things rot away. So we're barefooted, and within a month, all my ingrown toenails were flat. Came back from the war, they issued us shoes, and within 3 weeks, I had ingrown toenails. But the thing was, I realized that there were things that you needed to worry about, and there are things that you don't have to worry about. You know, don't build problems for yourself. There'll be enough of them for you to solve. And the thing was that being in a small advance party of 191 people, we had 3 second lieutenants, 1 captain, and for the 191 people, minus the 3 officers, 4 officers, there's 1 sergeant. That was all. The rest of us were just enlisted men. And for some reason, our group worked together. We looked after each other. We knew who the slackers were. We knew when a man put out his best. And you always tried to help the other guy, whether he was a slacker or hard worker, because he was still one of your guys. For instance, a month before my 21st birthday, I weighed 60 pounds. That's not bad, because I only weighed 105 to begin with. So I only lost 40% of my weight. Now, between losing 40% of your weight and 50%, like these 200-pound guys that I had not grown up, but worked with and been in the Army with, that's a big difference. If you're 100 pounds or 200 pounds. But for me, 60 pounds was, if I weighed 50 pounds, that would have been drastic. But the thing was, in our group of 191 people, we all, we all buddied up. Because we found out you couldn't live alone. All the water you drank had to be boiled. So when you were sick, you couldn't do that. Somebody else had to do it for you. And when you have malaria, you drink a lot of water. So again, when you're sick, down with anything at all, somebody will watch out over you. And then the second thing that comes up is if the 2 men got sick, another group would help those 2 men. It's just simple. Anyone who needed help would find it. You don't have to ask for it. We can see. And that's the one thing that got us through. The fact that we knew that we lived for each other as well as for yourself. And then the other thing was, I had to being a small man, I had to prove myself, or at least I felt that I had to prove myself. And one of the stories the guys would tell is that the first time we went out on bivouac. Brody was my sergeant, and he and I worked together, and we were taking the 5-man tents to the sites to set up. So the first time, Brody and I grabbed a tent. He was 6 feet tall, I'm 5 feet 1. And it was kind of awkward. So we dropped the tent at the site, and on the way back, Brody said, Eddie, he said, let me take the tent. And he said, it's kind of awkward for the two of us to work that way. So he went up to the truck and said, put it right there. And I was right behind him, and I said the same thing. And I staggered to my side and dropped the tent. Well, it wasn't that I had to prove myself, but I felt I had to, because there's always a doubt about a little guy, whether he can carry the load or not. And when we're taking prisoners, one of the things we had to do was carry 100-kilo bags. 100 kilos is 240 pounds, 220 to be exact. And we hated when the Japanese learned English to the point where they could say, one man, one. Because when we asked, it was for 2 men to carry, and they would say, one man, one. And we couldn't believe them because, but that was the order, and I was the first man in line. 2 men put the sack on my back, and I took it to the ship and dumped it into the hole. And on the way back, I noticed the Japanese dock workers, who weren't much bigger than most Cantonese, about 5 feet 2 to 5 feet 5, and about 110, 120 pounds. And I noticed they were carrying with ease. So I tried to tried it with the next load, and it was easier. And so that was when the guys found out that Eddie doesn't have to prove himself anymore. He'll do anything that he's capable of doing, and that was how it was within our group. Judy often asked me if I encountered overt racial discrimination when I was in Texas, when I was a teenager, and I told her no. I said, because most of the time, people saw me as a tiny person, not a physical threat. And the other thing was, they had never seen Chinese before, so it was kind of a curiosity. So I never really encountered racial prejudice. And the only time that I did encounter it, it was comical, it was funny, because we had been out on the ranch for about a year, came in, I hadn't had a haircut in a year, and Red asked me, he said, what are you going to do, Eddie? I said, first thing I'm going to do is take a shower, because we didn't have a shower at the ranch. You had bathtubs, things like that. We didn't have hot water unless you heat it up on the stove. So I said, I'm going to take a hot shower, and then I'm going to go to a movie, because at the ranch we didn't have a phone, electric lights, or any of those things. And so I walked up to the theater about 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and the girl, I put down my money, and the girl looked at me, and she said, can't say a ticket. I said, I'll take standing room. I said, I haven't seen a movie in a year. She said, oh, not that. She said, we can't sell tickets to Indians. I said, I'm not Indian. And she said, not Mexicans either. I said, I'm not Mexican. And she rang for the manager. The manager came out and said, what's the problem? I said, this man wants to buy a ticket. He said, sell him a ticket. I said, but he's Chinese. He said, I can see that. and I felt embarrassed because I had put someone in an embarrassing situation for no reason at all. But it was that sort of thing that I learned along the way. That even though in Chinatown I had lived in a restricted area, that we couldn't even rent outside of Chinatown, that basically people are the same if you just let them be who they are. They let me be who I was, and they were perfectly willing to accept me just because I wasn't doing anything strange. There are times when I had to learn many things. When I went to the theater, I normally sit in the balcony. And the first time I did that, the usher came up to me and said, sir, you can't sit here. I said, I always sit in the balcony. He said, no, this is the colors section. Well, but I mean, it was just something I had to learn. And that's basically what life is, really. You learn. There's something new every day. And when I was a kid growing up, I always thought white people were, I mean, they're on top. They control everything. Then when I was in the Army, there was a set of twins. They're illiterate. They couldn't read or write. When they wanted to write a letter, someone had to write it for them. When it got sent home, someone had to read the letter to the parents. Then I realized that white, black, yellow, brown, doesn't make what the color is. People are people. They're good people, they're bad people. And you just have to take them as they come. We even learned that among the Japanese. I mean, there are good ones, there are bad ones. There's some even indifferent that you're a prisoner. But the mean ones are the ones you remember. And the Korean guards were the ones, it took me 40 years to get over the fact that there are Koreans in this world. Because they were the meanest of all. And even when I understood why they were mean, it didn't help. And the strange thing was, after the war, we saw them a week later, and we helped them. Because they were helpless. The Japanese army had discharged them wherever they were. This happened to be Siam. And we saw them in town, and they didn't know what to do. And we told them, the first thing you should do is go to any Christian church or mission, and they'll help you. And a week earlier, we would have killed them. But all we saw were hopeless people. And unconsciously, we realized that if we treated them the way they treated us, then what was the difference between us, among us? And we realized that if you don't learn from every lesson that you've gone through, you survive for nothing. And that's all I can say. I survived. Just like most of you guys who had joined the service. You know what's important in your life. And that's what you have to remember. You never forget the bad things. I mean, we never heard the term PTSD until 25 years after the war. But we still had problems to deal with. And you have problems to deal with during the war and after the war. Except that you should be a better man to deal with them. And most of you guys are. And all I can say is that growing up in Chinatown helped me survive the war. Because learning how to survive in a situation like that helps you in any situation. That's about all I can say.
Thank you, Eddie. I recall in the book, you had an anecdote about how you learned to carry the heavier weights. Do you recall that? You
Yes.
observed a lady or a woman who was carrying about 300 or 400 pounds.
No, about 250 maybe.
Yeah, and so tell us what you noticed that she did that helped you become a better weightlifter.
After we capitulated, we had to wait around for 3 weeks, waiting for the Japanese to pick us up. Now this may sound strange, because we had orders to surrender, but we never saw any Japanese for 3 weeks. But if you're on an island, there's not much you can do. See, Australia is about 1,200 miles away, and the other thing we found out as prisoners, you don't escape because they don't need barbed wire. Because a white face among the natives just stand out like a sore thumb. And even as an Asian, I wouldn't try it because I didn't speak the language. We had some Australians who spoke the language in Burma. He had worked there. He had lived there. He got away for 2 days because the natives turned him in for $10. And in World War II history, when the Japanese occupied a country, they put in play money and took all the real money out of the country. If you're in Burma, they would have Burmese money. They didn't occupy Thailand, so they didn't have ticos. And in Java, they used the Dutch money. So we were paid in whatever money we were in. So, in Canada, so while we were waiting for the Japanese, these ladies would come by with their shoulder poles with baskets on the end. You've probably seen them in movies. And the guys would try and pick up the basket, loaded baskets, and they couldn't get the load centered. And once they picked it up, they couldn't get it steady. Because you pick up the pole, the loads would kind of bounce a little bit. And the ladies who were carrying the loads would just laugh because to them it was nothing, it was easy. But they couldn't see all these grown men trying to do the same thing. So when I finally learned the trick with loaded baskets, it was very simple. When you pick up